At Gen Con 2014, I picked up 2 games by AEG that were published under the Lost Legacy banner. 2 sister games based on the same system, the same rules, they just have different card effects, and that determines differences in gameplay. These games are Lost Legacy's The Starship, which I played at Gen Con, I played last week and I reviewed last week, and then Lost Legacy Flying Garden, which I played more recently and I'm reviewing today. Just like Lost Legacy The Starship, the entire game is presented in this little bag here. It fits in here. It contains a small rulebook, small but pretty complete, 4 player rates, and 16 cards. That is all that you need for the game. I can explain all of the rules in the game because they're very simple, even if I've already talked about the system in Lost Legacy The Starship. It won't take long in case you missed that video review. You shuffle together all of the 16 cards, you take one face down from the top of the deck and you place it face down. Nobody must look at that card. You place it face down by the draw deck. You give a card to each player. That one card is the hand of each player, and then you start playing. During each turn, the player draws a new card from the deck, so the hand of that player goes to 2 cards. The player plays a card in front of him or herself, resolves the effect of the card stays there in front of the player, and that's it, the turn is over. The players go around the table, drawing a card, playing a card, until the draw deck is exhausted. At that point you have the investigation phase. Each player at that point will have a card in their hand. Well, each player that is still there. People can be eliminated before the game goes to the investigation phase. Those that are still in the game will have a card in their hand. Cards have a number printed in the top left corner, and players will get to make a decision, will get a shot at winning the game during the investigation phase, starting from the lowest number. So if you have the card number 1 in your hand, you're the first one to go in the investigation phase. What you're trying to do at that point is to identify the location of the Lost Legacy, which can be in another player's hand, or it can be in the ruins. The ruins are the area that is built around the card that you initially draw face down from the deck. That card may have remained alone, other cards may have been added to the ruins may or may not have been shuffled, again without players knowing exactly which card goes where. So there may be some cards in the ruins, and the player that is actively played in the investigation phase needs to choose one card in a player's hand or in the ruins, and the player is trying to identify the Lost Legacy. If you find the Lost Legacy, you win the game. If you try to identify the Lost Legacy during the investigation phase and you fail, then you go to the next higher number, and you can go to the point where there is a player with the Lost Legacy card in his hand. At that point, the player can say, well, it's turn number 5, it's my turn to investigate, and I know where it is, it's in my hand, boom, and that player wins the game. It may also be that the card is in the ruins, nobody has it in their hands, so after the investigation, in case the earliest players fail to identify the location of the Lost Legacy, then the investigation will go to players with higher numbers. So even if you have a high number, you still get a chance of solving the case, of finding the Lost Legacy, unless the card in your hand is an X. Actually, that's another case in which you do not investigate. That means you do not have a chance of winning the game. If the card in your hand at the end of the game is an X, you do not investigate. You need to have a card with a number. The game lasts about 5 minutes, and that's quote-unquote the full game. That means you'll probably play a string of games, and each game you will count as a round in a larger game. You probably will decide the number of points of rounds that a player needs to win the overall game. You just play a little bit and you see who does best. This is the idea of the game, which is the same, exactly the same that you have in the Starship. In Flying Garden, as I said earlier, the card effects are different. And actually in this case, these different card effects do affect gameplay. They do result in a gameplay feel which is very different from the one that I had in the Starship. Let me tell you about the effects. The Saint, number 1, that's a card that if you have in your hand during the investigation phase is very good because you get to go first, you're the first player to have a chance of finding the Lost Legacy card. But the effect of the card if you do not have it in your hand, if you played it earlier, is that if you would be eliminated and have the Saint face up in your discards, so if you played it earlier in the turn, discard your hand, flip the Saint face down, then draw a card as your new hand. You remain in the game. That allows you to prevent an effect that would otherwise eliminate you from the game. But you're also spending a Saint card, which would be very powerful and very useful during the investigation phase. Necromancer, return any player's discards to the deck, then shuffle the deck. So you steal effects that the players may have created by placing cards in their play area, in their discards. This also may lengthen the game a little bit, but is another card that, unless special circumstances happen, players will probably want to keep in their hand until the investigation phase, because going second it is still very good if you want to have a chance of finding the Lost Legacy. The Adventurer, look at up to 2 cards in the ruins, and then you may exchange one of those cards with your hand. That's good. That's just a solid, straightforward effect. Guardian, collect all players' hands without looking at them, shuffle the cards face down, and deal each player card at random. This pretty much resets the game, and I can't say that I like this effect very much. A big part of the fun is deduction in this game, trying to figure out what the other players have, depending on what they do, on their behavior, on their interaction, so I get a sense of who may have what. If you just reset the game, you add an element of randomness, which I can't think of anything beneficial coming from it. The Lost Legacy itself, the card that you want to find at the end of the game. You're eliminated or discard is this. If you're eliminated or discard is discarded, place it in the ruins instead of your discards. Then shuffle all the cards in the ruins. So not direct beneficial effect for you, unless you manage to have it at the end of the game and no one finds it before you identify it during your turn in the investigation phase. False Rumors. This is a card that I do not like very much. The effect is you draw 2 cards, then place a card from your hand into any player's discards and another in the ruins. This game already has only 16 cards, and one is not in the draw pile at the beginning of the game because it is in the ruins. That means that if this card is played twice and 4 cards are drawn as part of the effect, the deck really runs out of cards quickly. The game is already short as is. If you shorten it more, then you almost get the sense that, like, wait, did we play the game? Did we start already? No, actually we just ended the game. Oh, that's how it happened. That's how quick it can go, and you may have players that really do not get to feel involved in the game. The game as is, if you're playing with 4 players, will not give players a chance of taking many turns. You will go 2 or 3 times before there is the investigation phase. But it is still interesting because you still get to be involved in observing what other players are doing, trying to figure out what happens. False Rumors shortens the game and diminishes the involvement of the players to a point that to me affects the overall feel and experience of the game. That at least is my impression, and that's how I felt when I was playing the game and False Rumors was played. Storyteller. During the investigation phase, each storyteller in your discard allows you to make an additional investigation. This is pretty good, but the storyteller starts pretty late in the turn when it's a matter of investigating. He gets to investigate after a lot of other players have tried to do so. Curse. Name a number from 1 to 8. You cannot name X, and look at another player's hand. If his or her card matches the name number, that player is eliminated. Can be pretty brutal, can be pretty annoying. On the other hand, there aren't many cards in this game that will allow you to look at the player's hands. There are cards, say, in the Starship set that allow you pretty powerful combos that you place a card in the hand of an opponent, and then you know that the card can trigger an effect that will damage the opponent, and then you use a card to trigger the opponent. It's like a 1-2 punch. First I give you the bomb and then I make it explode. Not so much here. This card feels pretty random. Later in the game, a lot of cards will have been played. You can exclude those cards from the ones that players may have in their hand, but it still feels pretty random. Once If a wound is added to your discards and you already have any wounds in your discards, you're eliminated. That means the first card in your discard that has wounds does nothing. The second one will eliminate you. Which means, of course, you don't want to play that, because that goes in your discard pile. You'll try to give it to other players, you'll keep it in your hand, which is a problem, because if you at the end of the round you have that in your hand, you don't get to investigate. So you get a chance of losing. There's a chance that you lose if you play it in your discard pile. You may end up losing if you have it at the end. It's just such a negative card. And it gets worse when you keep in mind that there is an effect called the false rumors that allows a player to put cards in other players' discards. Remember, draw 2 cards, then place a card from your hand into any player's discards. That means you play false rumors, you draw a wound, you place another player's discard. Which means the player, if the player did not have any wounds, the player is halfway to be dead. The player already had a wound. Pretty much getting false rumors and then drawing another one means that you can eliminate very easily any player. This also makes things feel a little too random to me. I've seen games in which players did not get to play at all. Before they get to play, before they get to draw a single card from the deck, somebody used false rumors and they got a wound, and then the next player used false rumors too and inflicted a wound on that player that never got to play. And that I do not like. So, I like the system in general. I like the system behind the Starship and behind the Flying Garden. The Flying Garden set per se to me is much less interesting than the Starship. We started playing this, we played several rounds or games, call them whatever you like, and then after a while I was a little disappointed, and I was trying to teach the game to new players that didn't know the system. I was so excited about this, and I was excited about, well, let's try this. And I also saw that they weren't really warming up to the game. The system, some players knew Love Letter, so they could see the similarities, they were curious about it, but just the implementation of the system through these card effects wasn't all that it could have been, wasn't that exciting. So I said, well, you know what, let's put this aside for now. I took this one out, I said, you know the rules, let's play it. And everybody was much more engaged with the Starship, and I was like, okay, I wasn't mistaken when I had a very positive impression of this game. I had a lot of fun. I wasn't misremembering having a lot of fun with the Starship. It is just that the Flying Garden did not give me the same level of enjoyment. Neither it did give a good level of enjoyment to other players that were playing the game with me and that I was introducing the system to. So, if you want to try the Lost Legacy system, I definitely recommend starting from the Starship. If you're planning to purchase only one, do not go for the Flying Garden first. This is a much more solid deck of cards, a much more solid system of effects that create challenges, that create interesting situations, that have bluffing involved. This is a game in which I felt disempowered. I felt there were many elements that were outside of my control and almost everybody's control. The effect of luck was huge. The games felt anticlimactic when they ended too quickly because of false rumors. I just didn't feel all that excited about this game. If you play the Starship set, then you may want to add the Flying Garden as an expansion. Then you add these cards and you can mix and match these cards with the ones in this deck to have a mega game to increase the range of effects. But I don't know, I'm also a little bit worried about that one, because this game, the system of effects that you have here is so tight, it's so well done that it just works. It feels very accomplished. In this game, I felt like something was missing, and I'm not even sure that these effects, if you just add them randomly to this deck, would improve the situation. I think that you would need to play test things a little bit and see which cards would make the Starship even better rather than making things too random or too messy. So, not too excited about the Flying Garden unless maybe as an expansion for the Starship. Again, if you're planning to try the system, start from the Starship, and then if you feel the need to expand, go with the Flying Garden. But the Flying Garden per se is not as interesting a set, at least to me, as Lost Legacy, the Starship.